In the hushed Michigan courtroom, 16-year-old twins Noah and Nolan Mercer sat side by side, their shackles barely making a sound as they shifted. The judge's voice echoed with the weight of the charges, taking the lives of their own parents in a cold, calculated act. But instead of remorse, the brothers exchanged a sly grin, one even mimicking the judge's stern tone under his breath, as if the whole proceeding was some twisted game. They thought their age would be their ultimate shield, letting them walk away unscathed. Little did they know, the truth etched in digital trails and silent witnesses would soon shatter that illusion forever. Stories like this remind us that justice always finds its way. If you believe in accountability, subscribe now and tell us what you think below. This is how it all began, in a quiet suburb where homes looked just like any other, hiding tensions that simmered beneath the surface. Grant and Elaine Mercer were everyday parents, are working hard to give their sons a good life. Grant with his steady job, always fixing things around the house, and Elaine organizing family outings with a warmth that made everyone feel included. The twins, Noah and Nolan, seemed like typical teens on the outside, sharing jokes and finishing each other's sentences. But inside, a growing resentment brewed over rules they saw as chains. They dreamed of freedom, of money, and no more limits, whispering plans in the dark that would change everything. And in that same Michigan courtroom 2 years earlier, the air felt thick with disbelief. The Mercer family had always seemed ordinary from the outside. Neat lawn, American flag on the porch, minivan in the driveway. But ordinary houses can hold extraordinary fractures. Grant Mercer, 47, worked long hours at an engineering firm, the kind of man who fixed things before they broke and believed rules were how you showed love. He never raised his voice, but his quiet expectations carried weight. Elaine, 45, was the heartbeat of the home. Calendars color-coded, birthday cards saved in a drawer, texts that ended with heart emojis, even to her teenage sons. She still believed a hug could fix almost anything. The twins turned 16 that spring, and on the surface nothing seemed dramatically wrong. Their grades hovered in the B range, they played varsity soccer, they still laughed at the same dumb memes. Teachers described them as polite, if a little detached. Classmates envied how in sync they were, finishing sentences, wearing matching hoodies without planning it, answering questions in perfect stereo. It's like they share a brain, one friend once joked. The Mercers laughed about it at family dinners. No one realized how literal that shared mind had become. Friction had been building for over a year, though it never looked explosive from the outside. Curfews tightened when report cards slipped. Phones were taken away after midnight scrolling. Allowance was tied to chores they increasingly ignored. To Grant and Elaine, these were normal growing pains, teaching responsibility, preparing boys for the real world. To Noah and Nolan, every restriction felt like a deliberate theft of freedom. They began talking in low voices after lights out, framing their parents not as guides, but as gatekeepers standing between them and the life they deserved. Money without strings, cars without permission, nights without questions. The resentment found fuel online. Late-night algorithms served up content about alpha mindset, breaking free from controlling families, how young men were being held back by outdated rules. The twins didn't join dark corners of the internet. They simply absorbed the steady drip of grievance that made entitlement feel righteous. They started searching terms like inheritance age Michigan, what happens if parents die, juvenile life sentence. Not out of idle curiosity. They were window shopping futures. Grant noticed the distance first. Elaine felt it deeper. She began texting friends. The boys are so quiet lately, almost like strangers in their own house. She kept hoping it was a phase. Grant kept hoping structure would win. Neither imagined the next step their sons were quietly rehearsing. On the night everything changed started like hundreds before it. Dinner was tacos. Grant's turn to cook. Elaine showed the twins their updated college fund spreadsheet, proud of the numbers climbing. Noah nodded without looking up from his phone. Nolan asked how much would be there if something happened. Elaine laughed it off as morbid teenage humor. Grant reminded them both that life insurance existed for emergencies, not shortcuts. They smiled in unison, are the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. After dishes were done, the house settled into routine. Grant watched a baseball game in the living room. Elaine answered emails at the kitchen table. The twins disappeared upstairs. Around 11:30, the porch light clicked off on its timer. Neighbors later said the street felt peaceful. No barking dogs, no loud music, just the soft hum of suburbia winding down. Inside, though, two boys moved with purpose. They had already chosen their story, a home invasion gone wrong. They rehearsed details the way actors run lines, masked figures, forced entry, valuables taken. They even practiced the tone they would use on the 911 call, shocked but composed, just enough tremble to sell fear without overacting. They believed the plan was airtight because they were two voices saying the same thing, two bodies creating alibis, two minds agreeing nothing could go wrong. They were wrong about one thing. The house was watching. Doorbell cameras had become common on that street. The Mercers' own unit pointed at the front porch, but the neighbor directly across had installed a newer model with a wider angle and night vision sharp enough to catch movement 50 feet away. At 2:11 a.m., the smart lock on the front door registered an unlock using Grant's 4-digit code. At 2:14, two hooded figures appeared briefly in the cross-street camera's frame, carrying a single duffel bag, walking with the same loose, athletic gait the twins used on the soccer field. The footage was only 7 seconds long, 7 seconds that would eventually become the longest moment of their lives. Inside the house, the timeline compressed. A muffled sound, not quite a shout, more like surprise, cut short. Then silence that lasted too long. Around 2:19, the front door locked again from the inside. The smart lock dutifully logged it. Phones belonging to Noah and Nolan went into airplane mode for exactly 17 minutes, the precise window when the crime unfolded. Neither boy realized that airplane mode stops cellular pings but does nothing to erase local activity logs, screen-on events, or step counts recorded by fitness apps they never bothered to disable. By 2:36, both phones were back online. A single text survived deletion because it had already synced to the cloud before either twin hit trash. The message read, "Done. Clean it up." Sent from Nolan's phone to Noah's at 2:21. The reply came 30 seconds later. "Already on it." That tiny thread would prove more stubborn than any confession. The twins waited until just after sunrise. Newspapers piled up on the driveway. The garage side door stood slightly ajar, part of the staging. Around 7:45, one of them made the call. The voice on the recording sounded eerily level. "I think someone broke in last night. My parents, they're not moving." No sobs, no hysteria, just the flat delivery of someone reading cue cards. First responders arrived within 6 minutes. They found a house that looked almost too tidy for tragedy. Drawers pulled out, but jewelry box untouched. A window pried from the inside, glass fragments lying on top of undisturbed carpet fibers. Shell casings placed in a pattern that suggested careful positioning rather than panic. The smell of bleach lingered faintly beneath something metallic. The twins sat on the curb wrapped in blankets they didn't need. One scrolled his phone. The other watched paramedics with detached curiosity, as if observing a documentary about someone else's life. When a firefighter offered water, Noah asked, "Can we just go now?" Nolan nodded in perfect sync. A detective standing nearby wrote the moment in his notebook without comment. That detective was Marisol Vega, 16 years on the force, mother of 2 teenagers herself. She noticed the symmetry immediately. the way the boys answered questions as one organism, finishing each other's sentences, mirroring posture. She also noticed something else. Neither had asked how their parents died. Not once. Back at the station, the first pieces began falling into place, but the smart lock logs contradicted the forced entry story. The doorbell footage across the street showed 2 figures, not one. Gunshot residue swabs were taken quietly while the twins sat in separate interview rooms. Both tested positive. The gun safe in the basement had been accessed with multiple incorrect code entries at 1:58 a.m., someone guessing before finally getting it right. Grant's registered handgun was missing. The twins stuck to the script. Masked intruder. Sounds of struggle. They hid in the closet until it was safe. They were asleep when it happened. They woke to horror, every detail delivered with the calm precision of rehearsal. Detective Vega listened without interrupting. Then she asked one simple question that neither expected. "Which one of you called 911?" Both answered at the exact same moment. "We did." The room went quiet. For the first time that morning, the twins realized the mirror they had built together might reflect something they couldn't control. Across town, Elaine's calendar still hung on the kitchen wall. The square for that day read, "Twin Drivers Test, 4 p.m." The ink was still fresh. The appointment would never be kept. The twins thought they had planned the perfect crime. They thought 2 minds working as one made them untouchable. They were about to learn that truth doesn't need symmetry to win. It only needs to be patient. And the evidence was already 3 steps ahead. Grant Mercer's work boots still sat by the back door that morning, mud from the previous weekend's yard work dried into the treads. He had always been the practical one, the father who taught his sons how to change a tire and balance a checkbook, convinced that preparation was the best gift he could give. At 47, so he carried the quiet pride of a man who had built a stable life from modest beginnings. A steady engineering job that paid the bills, a house in a safe neighborhood, and a family he assumed would carry on his values. He wasn't flashy. His idea of a good evening was grilling burgers on the deck while discussing the twins' soccer games. Elaine often teased him about his predictable routines, but she loved that reliability. It anchored their world. Elaine Mercer moved through the house with the energy of someone who thrived on connection. At 45, she managed a small nonprofit, coordinating community events with the same enthusiasm she brought to family holidays. Her desk drawer held stacks of handwritten notes, birthday reminders, thank yous, little encouragements slipped into the twins' lunch bags even as they grew older. She was the one who remembered everyone's favorites. Noah's preference for extra cheese on pizza, Nolan's habit of adding hot sauce to everything. Friends described her as the glue that held people together, always ready with a listening ear or a home-baked treat. In quieter moments, she worried about the boys' growing distance, but chalked it up to typical adolescent moods. The twins at 16 presented a picture of normalcy to the outside world. They shared a bedroom upstairs, walls covered in posters of sports stars and motivational quotes like "No limits," scrawled in bold letters. Their closets held identical hoodies and sneakers, a habit from childhood that now felt like a uniform. In school, they maintained average grades, enough to avoid trouble, and their soccer coach praised their teamwork, how they anticipated each other's moves on the field without a word. Classmates saw them as inseparable, the kind of duo that could turn a boring class into quiet entertainment with synced eye rolls or whispered jokes. No one suspected the colder undercurrent under the way their unity had twisted into something exclusive and resentful. That unity stemmed from a lifetime of being the twins, a label that both empowered and isolated them. From birth, they had been dressed alike, celebrated together, even disciplined as a pair. Noah, older by 3 minutes, often took the lead in conversations, while Nolan backed him up with nods or finishing phrases. They shared friends, secrets, and increasingly, grievances. Late-night talks evolved from complaining about homework to questioning why their parents controlled everything: phones, money, curfews. "It's like they don't trust us," Noah would say. Nolan would echo, "Exactly, we're basically adults." Their bond became a shield against the world, reinforcing the idea that together they were invincible. Family dinners had become battlegrounds of subtle tension. Curfew disputes flared when the twins pushed for later hours, arguing they needed more independence for school events that didn't exist. Phone restrictions followed after Elaine caught them scrolling past midnight, leading to confiscated devices and lectures about responsibility. Allowance arguments escalated when they demanded more for clothes or games, dismissing Grant's insistence on earning it through chores. These weren't screaming matches, just pointed silences, eye rolls, and muttered agreements between the boys. To the parents, it felt like standard teenage rebellion. To the twins, each rule reinforced a narrative of unfair control, turning love into perceived oppression. The seeds of entitlement took root quietly. The twins began viewing adulthood as something owed to them, a door their parents were deliberately blocking. They fantasized about life without oversight, driving their own cars, spending freely, answering to no one. Online searches fed this: forums about young people breaking free, stories of inheritance changing lives overnight. They whispered about how much easier everything would be with more resources, eyeing the family's modest savings as their rightful ticket out. A poster in their room proclaimed, "Break the chains," meant as motivation, but symbolizing something darker in their minds. Financially, the Mercers were comfortable, but not extravagant. Grant's salary covered the mortgage on their 3-bedroom home in a leafy cul-de-sac. But Elaine's job added extras like family vacations to the lake. They weren't struggling, groceries always stocked, bills paid on time, but the twins craved immediacy. The latest gadgets, designer clothes, freedom from no. They started researching inheritance laws in secret, using incognito tabs on shared devices, calculating timelines and amounts. "What if we didn't have to wait?" one would say. The other would nod, the idea taking shape without alarm. The digital world amplified their drift. And late at night, with parents asleep downstairs, the twins dove into content that validated their frustrations. Videos about reclaiming power, communities where resentment toward authority was normalized. The algorithm pushed more of the same. Stories of escaping toxic homes, tips on mindset shifts for success. They didn't seek out extreme views. It came to them, layer by layer, turning mild annoyance into justified anger. Screens glowed in the dark, 2 phones syncing notifications, pulling them further from the family just feet away. Grant and Elaine remained unaware of the depth. Grant believed firmer boundaries would guide the boys back, more chores, structured weekends. Elaine leaned on affection, planning surprise outings or leaving notes like "proud of you both" on their pillows. Neither could fathom the shift from sullen teens to something calculated. Friends noticed Elaine's occasional comments. "The boys are pulling away. I miss our talks." But everyone assured her it was temporary. The last normal day unfolded like a routine script. Groceries unloaded in the morning, apples for snacks, milk for breakfast. Car keys jingled as Grant headed to work, calling back reminders about after-school practice. Elaine updated the family group chat. "Dinner at 7, your favorites." The twins responded with thumbs-up emojis, nothing more. Afternoon brought the usual: school bells, locker slams, quick texts between classes, no signs of the storm brewing. That evening, neighbors recalled hearing laughter from the Mercer house, perhaps a shared joke over dinner. Lights glowed warmly through the windows, the home appearing as peaceful as ever. By 10, the upstairs went dark first, followed by the living room. A duffel bag, however, had appeared in the garage earlier that day, tucked behind boxes, its contents carefully selected. Elaine texted a close friend around 11. "The boys seem distant lately. Hoping it's just a phase." The message showed delivered, but no reply came that night. She set her phone down, unaware it would be one of her last. Victim innocence hung in the air like unspoken promises. Grant spent part of the evening tweaking the twins' college fund spreadsheet, adding projections for tuition and books. He still saw their future as bright, invested in every deposit. Elaine sorted through old photos, smiling at baby pictures of the boys, not planning to frame one for their upcoming birthday. An aunt left a voicemail that afternoon. "Call me when you can, thinking of you all." It went unreturned, lost in the day's busyness. Extended family ties remained strong. Holidays brought everyone together, with the twins at the center. Dread built slowly as the clock ticked toward midnight. The narrator's voice might whisper that the quiet street would soon echo with sirens, transforming peace into evidence. Though sprinklers clicked on schedule outside, unaware. The crime window approached, time compressing like a held breath. House lights dimmed fully. The porch sensor flickered once, capturing nothing unusual. Yet, the twins had chosen their cover story weeks earlier. A burglary scripted to every detail, from the forced window to the missing items. They believed rehearsal made it foolproof, but scripts crumble under scrutiny, especially when devices remember more than people do. A door closed softly upstairs, too softly for the weight of what followed. The house that looked like every other held its breath, the calm before irreversible change. Morning light filtered through the curtains of neighboring homes, casting long shadows on the Mercer driveway, where newspapers lay untouched, their plastic sleeves dewy from the night. A delivery driver paused his route, noticing the unusual pileup, but it was the next-door neighbor, Mrs. Harlan, who first sensed something off. She saw the garage side door cracked open, a sliver of darkness inside, and called out twice before dialing emergency services. Her voice on the recording trembled slightly. "The Mercer's door is ajar, and no one's answering. It's not like them." Sirens approached within minutes, slicing through the suburb's calm like an unwelcome alarm. The twins made their own call moments later, voices steady on the line. "We think someone forced their way in," one said, describing a chaotic scene they claimed to have discovered upon waking. The dispatcher noted the lack of urgency, the flat tone that suggested recitation rather than raw fear. Paramedics and officers arrived to a house that felt staged, furniture slightly askew, but no footprints in the dew outside. The air held a sharp, cleaned scent, masking something heavier that lingered in the hallways. First responders flipped on lights, their footsteps careful on the polished floors. They moved room by room, calling out, until they reached the master bedroom. There, Grant and Elaine lay still, positions indicating a sudden interruption to their rest, no signs of prolonged resistance. Valuables remained in plain sight, wallets on the dresser, electronics untouched. The scene whispered, arranged, not random chaos. Officers secured the area, yellow tape stretching like barriers against the ordinary. Crime scene technicians arrived next, gloved hands snapping into place as they documented every angle. Shell casings dotted the floor in a deliberate pattern, trajectories suggesting close range from someone familiar with the space. Distances were measured precisely, notes scribbled about entry points that didn't align with forced intrusion. The window in the living room appeared pried, but glass shards rested atop carpet fibers, untouched by any scuffle, clear evidence of after-the-fact setup. Outside, the twins sat on the curb, our blankets draped over their shoulders by a kind officer. Noah checked his phone absently, scrolling through notifications as if waiting for a ride. Nolan watched the activity with mild interest, asking a paramedic about timelines rather than outcomes. Their composure struck responders as unusual. No tears, no frantic questions, just synchronized nods when asked if they were okay. A responder approached with water bottles, offering quiet comfort. "This must be tough," she said. Nolan shrugged the blanket off, replying, "Can we go now? We have school." The words hung in the air, a chill that didn't match the morning warmth. Detective Vega, arriving on scene, overheard and jotted it down, her instincts flaring at the disconnect. Vega introduced herself gently, asking the boys to recount the night. They spoke in turns, seamless as always. Strange noises, hiding until dawn, shock upon discovery. Details flowed too smoothly, like a story polished over time. She noted their matching postures, the way they avoided eye contact with the house, now buzzing with activity. The first forensic clue emerged from an unexpected source, the neighbor's doorbell camera, angled just right to capture the street. At 2:14 a.m., two hooded shapes moved briefly into frame, gait athletic and identical, duffel in hand. Vega watched the clip on her tablet, pausing to zoom. No faces, but the timing screamed relevance. She kept it quiet for now. She'd letting the boys believe their narrative held. The basement gun safe drew attention next. Grant's registered firearm was gone, the keypad log showing fumbling entries at 1:58 a.m., wrong codes tried before success. Vega wondered who knew the combination well enough to guess under pressure. Cell tower data trickled in quickly. Both twins' phones showed a suspicious gap. Airplane mode engaged precisely during the incident window. Local logs, however, betrayed activity. Steps counted. My screens illuminated. The boys hadn't accounted for how devices remember silence. Vega posed her question again in the interview van. "Which of you dialed for help?" The twins responded in unison, "We did." The air thickened with the weight of that shared lie, a crack in their perfect harmony. As the house emptied, bodies carefully transported under sheets, the space felt hollowed out. Elaine's calendar remained on the wall, a silent witness to interrupted plans. Our Vega directed Tex to bag the twins' shoes for lab analysis. Lab preliminaries came fast. Microscopic glass in the shoe treads matched a shattered jar from the kitchen, not the forced window. The staging unraveled thread by thread. The question lingered in the command tent. If no outsider entered, who orchestrated the tragedy? Evidence tape sealed doors, a barrier against denial. The crime scene camera captured it all, shutter clicking methodically, unforgiving in its detail. Each frame built toward truth, exposing what words tried to hide. The twins thought they'd scripted the perfect deception, but forensics spoke louder, turning their two calls into one undeniable contradiction. The mini-climax loomed, the net tightening, anger rising at the calculated calm. Detective Marisol Vega stood in the makeshift command center, set up in a spare conference room at the county sheriff's office, staring at the wall that had already begun to resemble a spider's web. On strings of red yarn connected photographs, printouts, and timeline markers. Every call log, every door-open record, every purchase receipt from the last 48 hours had been pulled and pinned in chronological order. The center of the web was the Mercer house at 2:14 a.m., the moment everything converged. Vega's team had expanded the neighbor's doorbell footage, frame by frame. Multiple angles from nearby homes showed a familiar family sedan rolling slowly down the street without headlights. On the driver's silhouette matched the lean posture Noah adopted when he practiced parallel parking in the driveway. The passenger's outline mirrored Nolan's habit of slouching slightly left. Gait analysis software, pulled from old soccer game footage, confirmed the match with 92% confidence. Identical did not mean indistinguishable. Science saw the difference. Smart lock data arrived next, cold and precise. The front door unlocked at 2:11 a.m. using Grant's personal 4-digit code. It relocked from the inside at 2:19. No external breach registered. Vega circled the timestamps in red marker. Whoever entered knew the code. Whoever left made sure the door appeared secure again. The gun-safe keypad told its own story. 3 incorrect attempts at 1:58 a.m., followed by success on the 4th. The boys had practiced the combination before, but nerves made fingers slip that night. Vega imagined the basement light flickering on, 2 shadows hunched over the metal door. I whispering corrections until it clicked open. The first formal interview took place in separate soft rooms at the station. Noah went first. He described a masked figure in black, muffled sounds, terror that kept them frozen in the upstairs hallway closet until morning. Details poured out smoothly. Height about 5'10", gloves, a low voice demanding valuables. Vega underlined too much detail in her notes. Real victims usually remembered fragments, not full cinematic scenes. A Nolan's account matched almost word for word, down to the intruder's supposed cologne scent. Something cheap and chemical. Vega asked gentle follow-ups, watching for hesitation. None came. The twins had rehearsed well, their alibi cracked under quiet pressure. Both insisted they had been asleep since 11. Phone health data disagreed. Screen-on events spiked at 1:47 a.m. and again at 2:05. Step counts registered movement, short paces consistent with pacing a bedroom. But the devices they carried everywhere had recorded their wakefulness while they claimed unconsciousness. Neighborhood canvas yielded more. Mrs. Harlan, the same woman who noticed the open garage door, recalled hearing 2 sharp pops around 2:15, followed by a car door closing softly. She had glanced out her window and seen 2 figures moving toward the Mercer driveway. Not one fleeing intruder, but 2 shapes walking together. Her porch swing had creaked as she leaned forward, trying to make sense of the shadows. A gas station CCTV clip surfaced from a clerk who recognized the twins from soccer games. At 12:47 a.m., they bought 2 energy drinks and a pack of gum. One wore Grant's Navy windbreaker, the same jacket later reported missing from the house. The footage showed them paying cash, heads down, no small talk. Vega requested the windbreaker be added to the evidence list. Forensic lab cues moved faster than usual under the weight of public attention. Gunshot residue swabs from both twins' hands tested positive. Partial prints lifted from the safe handle aligned with Noah's right thumb. Fibers from the duffel bag matched carpet in the twins' bedroom. Every piece fit a pattern the boys hadn't anticipated. Digital warrants hit cloud providers overnight. Deleted messages could vanish from devices, but often lingered in backups. Bernolan's secondary email account, used for school projects, had auto-synced a draft note, time-stamped the day before the crime. After tonight, no more rules. We stick to the plan, and it's over. The date matched. Vega read the line twice, feeling the temperature in the room drop. Social circle interviews painted a troubling picture. One teammate remembered the twins joking in the locker room weeks earlier. "We'll be free soon. No more curfews, no more lectures." They had laughed when they said it. The friend's voice shook as he repeated the words on tape. Money trail searches uncovered browser history on a shared laptop. Parents die inheritance Michigan. Juvenile sentencing guidelines. Life insurance payout timeline. Timestamps predated the crime by months. Vega pinned printouts to the board, each one a quiet scream of premeditation. The prosecutor joined the team that afternoon. She reviewed the mounting file and spoke softly. This wasn't a snap decision, and this was choreography. Her pen paused mid-note, underlining the word planned 3 times. A recovered text fragment survived deletion because it had partially uploaded before wipe. "Did you wipe the prints?" Sent at 2:28 a.m. The reply, "Yeah? Gloves after." Vega stared at the screen, the small words carrying the weight of certainty. Vega returned to the 911 recording, slowing the audio. Beneath the controlled tone, she heard something unmistakable, a faint smile in the delivery. The same inflection the twins used when they pulled off a good prank at school. She froze the waveform, letting the silence speak. The timeline board grew heavier with every addition. Boxes closed in, connections tightening like a noose the twins never saw coming. They had believed two minds working as one created perfect cover. But evidence didn't need symmetry. It only needed to be relentless, and it was closing the distance fast. The forensic lab at the state police headquarters processed the Mercer case with unusual speed, driven by the quiet urgency of a crime that had already begun to ripple through the community. Technicians worked in shifts, trays of evidence moving methodically under bright lights. The first major report landed on Detective Vega's desk before noon the next day. Gunshot residue results. Both twins tested positive on their dominant hands. Alone, and the finding proved little. Residue could transfer in countless innocent ways. Combined with everything else, however, it became another link in a chain that refused to bend. Trajectory analysis followed. Ballistics experts reconstructed the angles using laser pointers and scale models of the master bedroom. Shots entered at close range, downward trajectories consistent with someone standing beside the bed rather than bursting through a doorway. The patterns aligned perfectly with the layout someone who knew every creak in the floorboards would navigate. An outsider would have hesitated, stumbled, left mismatched angles. These shots carried the confidence of familiarity. Glass analysis delivered the next quiet blow. The shards embedded in the treads of both twins' sneakers matched fragments from a broken mason jar in the kitchen trash, not the living room window they claimed had been forced. Under magnification, the edges told the story. The jar had been shattered deliberately on carpet, then the pieces pressed into shoe soles to simulate a break-in path. The window glass, by contrast, showed clean pry marks from the inside, no corresponding debris on the exterior sill. Staging, once subtle, now screamed. Partial fingerprints lifted from the gun safe handle belonged to Noah. Right thumb and index finger, pressed hard enough to leave clear ridges. The boys had worn gloves for parts of the act, but not consistently. Panic or haste had caused them to touch barehanded during the final moments. Vega pictured the basement scene, one twin holding the flashlight, the other fumbling the dial, skin meeting cold metal before they remembered protection. Digital forensic specialists worked through the night on cloud backups. Deleted search histories resurfaced, like ghosts refusing to stay buried. Queries for rural disposal sites, are weighted bag techniques, and how long does gunshot residue last on skin appeared in both twins' browsing data, timestamps clustering in the weeks leading up to the crime. Metadata showed the searches were made from the same Wi-Fi network, late at night when parents slept downstairs. Vehicle telematics from the family sedan provided irrefutable movement. The car's onboard system recorded ignition at 2:23 a.m., engine running for 12 minutes, and then a short drive ending at a river pull-off 3 miles away. The twins had insisted the vehicle never left the garage that night. GPS pings aligned perfectly with the smart lock re-entry window. They had used the car to dispose of something, clothing, perhaps the gun itself. Divers entered the river the following afternoon under a gray sky. The water was cold and slow-moving, perfect for hiding weight. Within 90 minutes, they located a black duffel, secured with duct tape and river stones. Inside, soaked hoodies matching ones from the twins' closet, a box of ammunition consistent with Grant's missing firearm, and a pair of latex gloves turned inside out. Water had preserved enough fibers for comparison. The bag hit the evidence tarp with a wet slap that echoed across the quiet bank. Vega reviewed the recovery photos in silence. They didn't just lie, she told her team. They curated an entire performance. Each item connected back to the house. My closing loops the boys believed had been severed. Friends' statements added psychological weight. One teammate, shaken during his interview, recalled the twins practicing sad faces in the school bathroom mirror weeks earlier. They said it was for a prank, he explained, voice cracking. But they kept adjusting until it looked real. The gallows humor now read as rehearsal, not jest. An insurance call log surfaced from the family provider. At 9:17 a.m., on the morning after discovery, while officers still processed the scene, Noah had dialed the toll-free number and asked about next steps for a policy payout. The recording captured polite curiosity rather than grief. The adjuster noted the call for follow-up. It became exhibit material. Elaine's phone held one final heartbreaking detail. At 2:06 a.m., she had attempted to dial Grant, perhaps sensing danger in the dark. The call never connected. Something interrupted her hand reaching for the bedside table. The incomplete log sat in the digital report like an unanswered question. Family members began receiving early briefings on the emerging evidence. An aunt listened in stunned silence as Vega outlined the contradictions. Grief twisted into nausea. The house they had visited for holidays now felt like a crime set. They were just boys, she whispered. The words no longer fit. Vega planned the first formal interrogation with care. Separate rooms this time, no shared glances, no finishing each other's sentences. The strategy aimed to fracture the twin echo chamber. Which one would speak first under pressure? Which would cling hardest to the script? A memo recovered from Nolan's cloud account provided the clearest glimpse into their thinking. If we stick to it, they can't choose which twin did what. We both stay clean. The cursor had blinked after the final period, as if waiting for confirmation that never came. The law, however, offered no such division. Conspiracy statutes treated joint planning as full responsibility for each participant. They had believed two bodies meant half the blame. The statutes disagreed. Vega signed the arrest warrants that evening. Printers spat paper in steady rhythm, each sheet carrying the weight of charges. 2 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, tampering with evidence. The ink dried quickly. Handcuffs closed around wrists that had once high-fived after soccer goals. Metal met metal with a final decisive click. The twins thought science would bend to their story. Instead, every test, every log, every recovered fragment tightened the net they never saw coming. Truth emerged not in dramatic confessions, but in patient, unblinking data. And the data had spoken clearly. The arrest unfolded on a crisp Tuesday morning in the high school parking lot. Squad cars pulled in quietly. A lights off, blocking the exits without fanfare. Students streamed toward the building, backpacks swinging, unaware at first. Then the deputies stepped out, vests visible, and the air shifted. Noah and Nolan were walking side by side toward the main entrance, hoods up against the wind, when the officers approached. "Noah Mercer, Nolan Mercer, you're under arrest." The words landed softly at first, then echoed as heads turned. Handcuffs clicked into place in full view of classmates frozen mid-step. One twin, Nolan, actually winked at a friend standing nearby, mouthing, "Watch this," as if the moment were theater. Noah kept his chin up, scanning the growing crowd for cameras rather than faces. No tears, no pleas. Just the same synchronized calm they had worn on the curb outside their house. The performance continued, even as metal bit into wrists. At the station, they were separated for the first time since the crime. To 2 interview rooms, 2 one-way mirrors, 2 ticking wall clocks. The echo chamber broke. No shared glances to confirm the next line. No finishing each other's alibi. Vega entered Noah's room first, folder in hand, voice even. Noah stuck to the script at the start. Masked intruder, strange sounds, hiding. He used phrases he shouldn't have known. Chain of custody, reasonable doubt, words that sounded rehearsed from late-night legal videos. Vega let him talk, then slid the smart lock log printout across the table. This shows the front door unlocked with your dad's code at 2:11 a.m. Explain that. Noah blinked once, recovered quickly. Must be a glitch, or someone guessed it. Vega didn't argue. She simply moved to the next page, the doorbell still frame. 2 hooded figures, same build, same walk. Nolan's jaw tightened, visible through the monitor feed. Fear flickered, brief but real. In the other room, Nolan feigned emotion more convincingly. Eyes welled on cue, a tissue dabbed at dry cheeks. He checked Vega's reaction after each tear, like scoring points. She played the 911 audio, slowed. Listen to your own voice. No shake, no break. People grieve differently, sure, but this sounds like reading lines. Nolan shrugged. Shock does that? Vega advanced to the river duffel photos. Wet clothing, ammunition box. Nolan's mask slipped. So what? Could be anyone's. His tone edged toward defiance. Vega remained calm, Kesh letting silence do the work. Then she placed the recovered draft note in front of him. After tonight, no more rules. Dated the day before. Nolan's eyes darted left, calculating escape routes that no longer existed. Across the hall, Noah faced the same note. His narcissism surfaced raw. They were controlling, always rules. We just wanted to live. He spoke of his parents in past tense already, as obstacles removed rather than people lost. Entitlement laid bare under fluorescent light. The mini-climax arrived when Vega showed Nolan the contradiction on tape. First he muttered, "He made me do it." 3 seconds later, panic corrected. "We didn't do anything." The flip-flop captured cleanly on digital recording, red light blinking steady. Vega didn't smile. She simply noted the timestamp. Both eventually requested lawyers. Interviews stopped. Chair legs scraped back. The rooms emptied, leaving only the hum of recording equipment and the weight of what had been said. And family received the news in waves. An aunt collapsed against a kitchen counter when Vega delivered the update. Grandparents refused to believe until they saw the footage. Then fury replaced denial. They were laughing, the grandmother whispered, rosary beads twisting in her fingers. The prosecutor filed charges that afternoon. 2 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, evidence tampering, weapons offenses. Adult court, no juvenile leniency requested. Just the paperwork carried the courthouse stamp with a heavy thud. In holding cells separated by glass, the twins traded a grin through the partition. Still performing, still believing the audience would eventually applaud. They didn't yet grasp that the stage had changed. Court would be their next platform, but the lights there exposed rather than flattered. The jail door sealed behind them with a final, swallowing click. Metal on metal. No echo, no reprieve. And they had thought separation would be temporary, that their twin bond would carry them through. But the mirror had cracked. One had pointed at the other, even for a heartbeat. The unity they relied on began to fracture under its own weight. And the courtroom waited, patient and unblinking, ready to finish what forensics had started. The investigation had moved past the raw mechanics of evidence collection into something colder and more unsettling. Understanding how 2 16-year-old boys could reach the point where their parents became obstacles to be removed. Detective Vega kept returning to the same question in quiet moments, not why they did it, but how the idea took root so deeply that it felt inevitable to them. The answer lay less in dramatic trauma and more in a slow, steady accumulation of choices, each one validated by the other. The twins had never been troubled in the conventional sense. No arrests, no suspensions, no outward cries for help. School counselors described them as flat-effect charmers, polite when spoken to, quick with a smile, but always slightly detached, as if observing their own lives from a short distance. Notes from sessions mentioned deflection and mirrored responses, the way one would begin a sentence and the other would finish it without missing a beat. The bond looked like closeness. It functioned more like reinforcement. They had built an echo chamber of two. Every grievance Noah voiced found instant agreement from Nolan. Curfew became oppression. Phone restrictions became invasion of privacy. Allowance limits became proof that their parents didn't value them. The complaints started small, almost ordinary teenage complaints. But repetition turned them into doctrine. Together, they reframed discipline as deliberate cruelty. Love as control. No adult voice penetrated the closed loop they created. Online content fed the narrative without them ever seeking out the darkest corners. Late-night scrolls delivered videos about breaking free from toxic authority, mindset shifts for young men tired of waiting their turn. Algorithms recognized engagement and served more. Stories of inheritance windfalls, rants about parents who hold you back. The twins saved clips time-stamped after midnight, while watching side by side on twin beds, screens glowing in the dark. Each video confirmed what they already felt. They deserved more. And soon. Narcissistic injury grew with every boundary. A confiscated phone wasn't discipline, it was humiliation. A denied request for cash wasn't budgeting, it was rejection. They began speaking of their parents not by name but by role. The controllers, the gatekeepers. In their private language, adulthood wasn't something earned. It was something stolen back. Our money fantasies took concrete shape. They priced sports cars online, browsed luxury watches, calculated how far insurance payouts and savings accounts would stretch. Finally living, they texted each other from across the room. The week before the crime, one searched for a specific red coupe, $60,000, zero down if the funds arrived quickly. They weren't dreaming, they were budgeting. The dynamic carried a subtle competition beneath the unity. Noah positioned himself as the planner, the one who researched laws and timelines. Nolan executed details, testing the gun-safe combination, practicing calm delivery for the 911 call. Resentment simmered quietly. Noah sometimes spoke over Nolan in conversations. Nolan's eyes would narrow for a fraction of a second before agreement returned. The rivalry stayed buried because mutual benefit outweighed it. For now. Elaine's closest friend described her worry in a recorded statement. She kept saying it was just moodiness. She'd leave notes on their pillows, "Proud of you both," hoping it would reach them. She never stopped trying. The friend's voice broke on the last sentence. Elaine had died, still believing affection could bridge the gap. Vega, reviewing jail calls, noticed the twins' lack of performative grief, even in private. They discussed court outfits, joked about cafeteria food, never once mentioned funerals or loss. One call captured Noah saying, "When do we get the money?" followed by Nolan's quiet laugh. The audio hiss carried no remorse, only anticipation. Court filings began arriving. The defense floated mental health mitigation, adolescent brain development, frontal lobe immaturity, possible peer influence. The prosecution countered with premeditation evidence, searches, staging, disposal, post-crime demeanor. Lack of remorse featured prominently in every motion. Vega knew the judge would weigh youth, but the record showed calculation far beyond impulse. A grandmother listened to one leaked jail call through a family member. The twins' casual tone, joking about appearances while their parents' bodies waited for burial, hardened her grief into resolve. She clutched rosary beads until her knuckles whitened, whispering that accountability wasn't vengeance. It was necessity. The narrator paused here to reflect. They thought youth would erase intent. That age alone would soften the edges of what they had chosen. But youth explains development. It does not excuse maps drawn in advance, steps rehearsed, consequences anticipated and dismissed. The prosecution prepared a remorse montage for trial: the calm 911 call, the recovered texts, the river duffel, the insurance inquiry hours after discovery. Each clip built the portrait of two boys who mourned nothing except the inconvenience of getting caught. But one final jail call fragment leaked through discovery. A single line: "When do we get the money?" The audio carried a faint hiss of static, like breath held too long. No mention of Elaine, no mention of Grant. Only the question that had driven everything. Two shadows moved on the jail wall during visiting hours, still trying to look like one. But the separation had begun. One had already tested the waters of blame. The other had noticed. The courtroom loomed closer, where performance would meet scrutiny, and the lack of remorse would speak louder than any defense. They had built their story on the belief that two could always outweigh one. Evidence, law, and eventually a judge would prove otherwise. The arraignment courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, a scent that clung to every high-profile case in the county. Families filed in early, claiming the front rows like survivors staking ground after a storm. Grant and Elaine's relatives entered quietly, grandparents leaning on canes, an aunt clutching a small framed photo of Elaine smiling at last year's Thanksgiving. They sat straight-backed, eyes fixed on the double doors where the defendants would appear. Noah and Nolan arrived last, escorted by deputies. Fresh haircuts, clean button-down shirts borrowed from relatives, ties knotted unevenly. They looked younger in the harsh fluorescent light, almost like boys headed to a school event rather than facing murder charges. One of them, Noah, allowed the faintest smirk when he caught sight of the packed gallery and the row of news cameras. The expression lasted only a second before a deputy's hand guided him forward, but it landed like a slap in the quiet room. Bail was denied within minutes. The prosecutor stood at the podium, voice steady and measured. "These defendants present a clear flight risk and a continuing danger to the community. The evidence shows premeditation, staging, and a complete absence of remorse." She gestured toward the twins without looking at them. "They planned the deaths of their own parents. They disposed of evidence. They inquired about insurance payouts while first responders were still on scene." The judge listened without interruption, then nodded once. Bail denied. Defendants remanded. A soft gavel tap punctuated the decision. Noah's shoulders lifted in a tiny shrug, as if the ruling were a minor inconvenience. Nolan glanced sideways at his brother, seeking the usual sync. This time the look wasn't returned immediately. Discovery materials flooded the defense tables like a tidal wave. Digital forensic reports filled 3 binders. CCTV compilations ran for hours. Lab analyses detailed every fiber, every print, every timestamp. The public defender assigned to Noah flipped through pages with visible strain. His counterpart for Nolan did the same across the aisle. Overwhelmed, didn't begin to describe it. The defense posture coalesced quickly. Separate counsel now argued subtly different angles. Noah's attorney suggested Nolan had been the dominant force, writing the draft notes, accessing the safe first. Nolan's attorney countered quietly in filings. Noah handled logistics, researched disposal sites, initiated the insurance call. Each side planted seeds of division without ever saying the word betrayal aloud. The jury, when selected, would notice. During a brief recess, deputies repositioned the twins at the defense table. Noah leaned toward Nolan and imitated the judge's low, deliberate tone. "This court will not tolerate disruption." He kept his voice just above a whisper, but a nearby deputy heard every word. The deputy's stare was level and unblinking. Noah met it for a moment, then looked away first. Our victim impact preparations began in parallel. Elaine's sister requested permission to play her last voicemail at sentencing if the case reached that stage. The 30-second recording, ordinary, loving, interrupted, had been preserved by the phone company. "Call me when you get home. I love you." The court clerk noted the motion. The judge would decide later. For now, the family clung to small rituals, sorting Elaine's closet for funeral clothes, choosing photos that showed her warmth rather than her final stillness. The prosecution organized evidence like chapters in a story they intended to tell without mercy. They planned to start small, the smart lock log at 2:11 a.m., then build steadily. Gun safe entries, deleted texts, river duffel, search history. Each piece visual, time-stamped, irrefutable. Jurors would see a timeline forming on courtroom screens, boxes connecting until no daylight remained. As digital experts prepped explanations in plain language, metadata, cloud sync artifacts, deletion trails, all translated into slides a high school graduate could follow. The 3D model of the house, built by investigators, rotated slowly in test runs. Red lines tracing trajectories, green dots marking device pings, yellow arrows showing the path from bedroom to garage to river. The twins' jail behavior added unwelcome footnotes. Disciplinary notes accumulated, laughing during a chapel service, in taunting a guard about meal quality, passing notes during transport that deputies later described as mocking the process. Each incident stamped and filed, building a portrait of entitlement that refused to fade behind bars. Outside the legal chess game, the family carried private grief. The aunt, who had once braided Elaine's hair as children, now folded her sister's favorite sweaters, placing them in storage boxes labeled with careful handwriting. Hangers slid across the rod, leaving empty spaces that echoed louder than words. The narrator's voice might have observed here. In court, they sought attention through smirks and whispers. Outside court, the evidence demanded silence. Every log, every frame, every recovered bite worked toward one outcome. The twins had wanted to be seen as clever. Soon they would be seen clearly. Trial date arrived on the docket calendar with a quiet finality. Now the judge issued a standard warning during the last pre-trial hearing. Any further disrespect in this courtroom will be addressed swiftly and severely. Noah whispered, "Sure," under his breath. The microphone at the defense table caught the single word, faint but unmistakable. Some would later call the twins' attitude immaturity. Others would call it cruelty wearing a teenage face. The jury, when impaneled, would be asked to label it themselves. The courthouse doors closed behind the departing parties. The building settled into evening quiet, but the machinery of justice continued turning. Lights stayed on in the clerk's office. Printers hummed, binders thickened. The trial would begin soon. And when it did, the stage the twins had imagined would reveal its true lighting, harsh, revealing, and entirely unforgiving. Jury selection dragged through 2 long days in the Michigan courthouse, the room humming with low murmurs as potential jurors filed in. Families watched from the gallery like silent judges themselves, scanning faces for signs of sympathy or steel. The aunt who had sorted Elaine's closet clutched a small cross, whispering prayers between names called. 12 strangers emerged from the process. Ordinary people, a mix of ages and backgrounds, sworn to weigh facts without emotion. They sat straight in their box, notebooks open, unaware yet how deeply the story would test them. Opening statements began on a rainy morning, the patter against windows underscoring the gravity inside. The prosecutor stood first, framing the case as a calculated betrayal. These defendants didn't act in fear or impulse. They planned, they executed, they covered up, and they did it for freedom they felt entitled to steal. You'll see the searches, the logs, the lies, and you'll see their demeanor, even here, in this room. She paused, letting the words settle. The defense followed, softer. These are boys, 16 years old, their brains still forming. Damaged by strictness they saw as suffocation, Consider the whole picture: youth, pressure, possibility of change. The twins sat at separate tables now, a physical split mirroring the legal one. They passed notes through counsel when the judge wasn't looking, grins flashing briefly across the space. During the prosecutor's description of the crime scene, Nolan rolled his eyes subtly at a mention of staging. Noah caught it and suppressed a laugh. The bailiff's warning glance came swift, but the moment lingered in the jurors' peripheral vision. The judge addressed them directly, mid-morning. "This court will not be mocked. Focus on the proceedings, or face consequences." His voice carried the low rumble of authority, gavel tapping sharper than before. Noah straightened his tie. Nolan stared at the table. For a heartbeat, the room felt the shift. The first witness, Mrs. Harlan from next door, took the stand with steady hands. She described the night sounds: 2 sharp pops, a car door closing, shadows moving in tandem. "I saw 2 figures, not 1, she said firmly. They walked like they knew the yard. The defense crossed with questions about distance and lighting. "It was dark, yes, but I know what I saw." Her certainty held. The second witness, a first responder, detailed the scene's odd tidiness. Valuables untouched, on window forced from inside, and the boys, they were calm. Too calm for what we found. He paused at the word boys, glancing toward the defendants. The defense probed for bias. "No, just observation." Arrogance peaked when the prosecutor cued the 911 audio. The calm voice filled the courtroom, flat delivery, no tremor. As it played, Noah smirked, head tilted as if critiquing his own performance. The family saw it first. A grandmother stood trembling in the gallery, hand over mouth. Jurors shifted, noting the expression. The judge called a recess immediately. Deputies repositioned the twins farther apart at the table, chains dragged 2 inches across the floor. "Control yourselves," one whispered. The room exhaled as doors opened for air. The mini-climax arrived post-break. The prosecutor projected the doorbell still frame. 2 hooded shapes, duffel in hand, gait unmistakable. The courtroom inhaled collectively. For the first time, the twins stopped smiling. Noah's hand clenched under the table. Nolan's eyes widened briefly. The projector fan whirred in the silence. Defense Cross tried deflection. "Anyone could wear hoodies. Gait analysis isn't perfect." The prosecutor promised rebuttal with video overlays, soccer footage synced to the shadows. Science trumped suggestion. Jurors leaned forward, pens moving. The aunt stepped out during a break, returning after composing herself in the hallway restroom. Water ran from the sink as she washed her face. He's stealing for more. Justice demanded presence, even when it hurt. The narrator might reflect. They thought court was a stage for their act. But stages have lights that reveal every flaw, every false note. The digital evidence waited next, ready to expose the script's weaknesses. The judge admonished again at day's end. "Your demeanor is noted for the record," Nolan whispered, whatever, low enough that only his attorney heard, or so he thought. The table mic caught the edge of it, a feint in the transcript. Questions like this surfaced in whispers among observers. Is contempt a symptom of youth or a preview of deeper issues? The jurors watched the twins' faces now, weighing every glance. The prosecutor signaled the next phase. Tomorrow, the digital forensic examiner. A laptop was carried in like a loaded exhibit, its hum promising more revelations. The smirk returned briefly as the twins were let out, right before the day's testimony etched another crack in it. The courtroom emptied slowly, but the weight remained. The digital forensic examiner took the stand on the third day of testimony, a calm woman in her late 30s with wire-rimmed glasses and the steady delivery of someone who trusted data more than emotion. She swore the oath without flourish, then began walking the jury through concepts most had only half understood before. cloud synchronization, metadata persistence, deletion artifacts that refuse to disappear entirely. She spoke plainly, in using slides that showed simple timelines rather than dense code. Jurors leaned forward, following along. First came the screen-on activity. Both twins' phones recorded wake events throughout the night they claimed to have slept. Noah's device lit up at 1:47 a.m. for 3 minutes, then again at 2:05. Nolan's showed similar patterns, short bursts of use consistent with checking messages or notes. The defense objected that teenagers check phones constantly. The judge overruled after the expert clarified. These weren't passive notifications. The screens had been actively engaged. Airplane mode came next. The boys had activated it during the critical window, believing it erased their digital footprint. The examiner explained the limitation gently, but firmly. Airplane mode disables cellular and Wi-Fi signals. It does not stop local logging. Fitness apps, screen time trackers, even the phone's own health data continue recording steps, orientation changes, and usage timestamps. Jurors nodded slowly, the myth dissolving in real time. Search history followed, projected large on the courtroom screen. Queries appeared one by one. Inheritance age, Michigan. What happens to life insurance if parents die? How long does gunshot residue last on skin? Juvenile sentencing, Michigan. Timestamps clustered in the months before the crime, then intensified in the final weeks. But the examiner highlighted recovery from cloud backups, deleted entries that never truly vanished. A juror in the front row blinked hard when the date of one search lined up with a family dinner the twins had attended. The draft note appeared enlarged. After tonight, no more rules. We stick to the plan, and it's over. The date matched the night before the murders. The examiner confirmed metadata placed creation on Nolan's device, synced to Noah's secondary account minutes later. No edits followed. The words landed in the room like a confession spoken in plain English. Location data sealed the alignment. Car telematics showed ignition at 2:23 a.m., a 12-minute drive ending at the river pull-off. Phone GPS pings from both devices mirrored the route, brief deactivation during the act, then reactivation matching the car's path. Overlays on the 3D house model showed perfect synchronization, safe access, front door unlock, vehicle movement, river stop. No gaps, and no contradictions. River duffel photographs came next. The examiner walked through chain of custody, diver recovery, drying process, forensic cataloging. Soaked hoodies matched fibers from the twins' bedroom carpet. The ammunition box carried partial prints consistent with Noah's index finger. Water had preserved enough for DNA swabbing, profiles aligned. The prosecutor paused after each connection, letting jurors absorb the weight. Defense attempted deflection. Teenagers search strange things all the time. Curiosity, not intent. The examiner responded without hesitation. These searches were specific, repeated, and timed immediately before and after the event. Curiosity doesn't usually include disposal site maps the night parents are killed. A juror's mouth tightened visibly. A jail call recording played next, audio clean and cold. Noah's voice, laughing softly. "They're buying the story." "We're good." Nolan's reply followed. "Just keep quiet." The courtroom went still. Family members in the gallery stiffened. One aunt pressed a tissue to her eyes. Jurors stared at the defendants, who now sat rigid, no smirks, no eye rolls. The judge noted for the record, "Let the record reflect the defendant's current demeanor during playback." The court reporter's keys clacked faster, capturing the moment. Chain of custody documentation removed any lingering doubt. Every artifact, phone exports, cloud warrants, lab reports, carried signed forms, timestamps, witness signatures. No breaks, no contamination. The prosecution had built an airtight path from device to courtroom. Gunshot residue results and safe handle prints combined with the digital planning created a net rather than scattered threads. The examiner concluded her direct with a simple chart, green check marks beside each piece of evidence, red arrows showing how they interlocked. Our premeditation wasn't a feeling. It was a documented series of choices. The twins reacted visibly for the first time. Noah scratched at his cuff repeatedly, a nervous tick emerging under the table. Nolan stared at the floor, jaw working silently. The performance had cracked. What remained looked smaller, more ordinary. A friend of Elaine's testified briefly afterward, describing her kindness, how she organized community drives, remembered birthdays, sent encouraging texts even on hard days. A photo of Elaine smiling at a family picnic appeared on the screen. Jurors saw people, not statistics. The contrast sharpened the loss. The prosecutor closed the segment quietly. Premeditation is not emotion. It is action repeated, planning repeated, choice after choice. These defendants made everyone. The projector went dark. The words lingered on the blank screen like an afterimage. Tomorrow would bring more. Ballistics, friend statements, perhaps the twins' own words captured elsewhere. But this day had shifted something fundamental. The jury no longer looked at the defendants as boys caught in tragedy. They looked at them as architects of it, and the courtroom clock ticked forward, steady and merciless. The courtroom felt smaller on the morning the defense shifted strategy, as if the walls themselves had drawn closer under the pressure of mounting evidence. Separate counsel now sat at separate tables, like a visible fracture in what had once been presented as unbreakable unity. Noah's attorney leaned toward the jury during a sidebar and spoke in low tones about the dominant personality in the pair, implying Nolan had steered the plan from the beginning. Nolan's counsel countered in filings and quiet asides. Noah researched the disposal sites. He made the insurance call. Neither side named the other outright as the mastermind, but the implication hung heavy. Each twin now subtly pointed the finger while claiming diminished role. A court-appointed psychologist took the stand mid-morning, credentials crisp on the projector slide. He explained adolescent brain development in measured terms. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for impulse control and long-term consequence evaluation, continues maturing well into the mid-20s. 16-year-olds often act without fully weighing outcomes, he said, and the defense nodded along. Then came the cross-examination. The prosecutor asked, "Does planning over months, researching sentencing guidelines, staging a crime scene, and disposing of evidence align with impulsivity?" The expert paused, then answered carefully, "Those behaviors suggest premeditation, which complicates mitigation arguments." The jury heard the pivot clearly. Cross-examination continued relentlessly. The prosecutor listed actions one by one, rehearsing the 911 call, shattering a jar to stage glass in shoes, driving to the river at 2:23 a.m., deleting messages while leaving cloud backups. These are not the acts of someone acting on sudden impulse, correct? The expert conceded. Correct. Each yes came reluctantly, but it came. Jurors' pens moved steadily across notepads. The rivalry surfaced more openly during testimony about the draft note. Noah's attorney suggested Nolan authored it alone, pointing to metadata on his device. Nolan's counsel immediately objected, then, in redirect, implied Noah had accessed the safe first, fingerprints aligning with his hand. The jury watched the exchange like a slow-motion unraveling, two boys who once finished each other's sentences, now allowing counsel to finish accusations. During a particularly graphic description of the crime scene staging, one twin, Noah, scoffed audibly, a short, sharp sound that cut through the hush. Several jurors turned. The gallery stirred. The judge's gavel came down firmly. "Another outburst and contempt will be considered. Control yourselves." The warning carried sharper edges than before. A close friend from the soccer team testified next, voice unsteady but clear. He recounted overhearing the twins say, "We'll be free soon," in the locker room, followed by laughter. He described watching them practice sad faces in the mirror like it was a game. The defense attacked credibility, suggesting exaggeration, teenage bravado. The witness held firm. They weren't joking when they said it. Not really. A short clip, ruled admissible after heated arguments, played on the courtroom screen. Grainy phone video from months earlier, one twin, hard to tell which in low light, pulling exaggerated sad expressions, the other rating them like a coach. "Oscar-worthy," the voice said, followed by shared laughter. Jurors' mouths tightened. One woman in the back row folded her arms. Grant's former co-worker took the stand briefly. To describing overtime shifts, Grant worked to bolster the college fund. "He believed in those boys," the man said quietly. He said every extra hour was for their future. The overtime spreadsheet appeared on screen. Dates, hours, notes in Grant's neat handwriting. The contrast stung. Parents investing in tomorrow while sons plan to end today. The narrator's reflection settled over the room like a held breath. They killed the people building their runway, then complained the runway was too short. The jury would weigh that irony soon enough. Closing arguments began to take shape in the prosecution's binder. The lead attorney promised one timeline, one truth. A single unbroken chain from searches to staging to silence. The defense, in turn, prepared to plead for mercy, reminding jurors of age, of brain science, of redemption's possibility. Yet the twins' faces during victim photos showed no softening, no flicker of regret, and only the same guarded watchfulness. The judge instructed the jury to deliberate after the final witnesses. As they filed out, the twins exchanged a confident look across the tables, still believing charm or doubt could sway 12 strangers. Confidence met 12 pairs of eyes that had seen too much. The jury door closed like a vault, sealing the room in sudden quiet. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Outside, family members waited in clusters, some holding photos, and others simply holding each other. Inside, the twins sat flanked by counsel. The performance paused, but not ended. Deliberation would take hours, perhaps days. But the courtroom clock ticked on, indifferent to hope or arrogance. The verdict waited on the other side of that door, 12 voices ready to speak what the evidence had already whispered for months. And when it came, there would be no smirk left to hide behind. Hours stretched in the courthouse hallway like slow-moving shadows. Family members clustered in small groups near the vending machines, some pacing, others sitting motionless on hard benches with untouched coffee cooling in paper cups. The twins waited in a holding cell down a separate corridor, voices low, trading occasional comments that carried no weight of worry. One deputy later reported overhearing Noah say, "They'll hang on the brain stuff. We're still kids." Nolan gave a short laugh that echoed off concrete walls. Neither mentioned their parents. So the jury deliberated through the afternoon and into the next morning. Notes passed back and forth to the judge, questions about specific exhibits, clarifications on conspiracy law, requests to rehear the 911 audio and the jail call. Each request tightened the tension in the gallery. Elaine's sister sat with her hands folded, knuckles white, staring at the closed jury door as if willing it to open with mercy she no longer believed possible. When the foreperson finally signaled readiness, the courtroom filled quickly. Everyone stood as the jury filed in, faces unreadable, notebooks clutched like shields. The twins rose last, shackles clinking softly. They glanced toward the cameras first, then the family, still scanning for reaction rather than offering any. The judge asked the routine question, "Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" The foreperson stood. "We have, Your Honor." The clerk took the folded paper, unfolded it, and then began reading count by count in a voice that carried across the silent room. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Grant Mercer. Guilty. A soft gasp escaped from the gallery. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Elaine Mercer. Guilty. The aunt's shoulders shook once, then steadied. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty. On the charge of tampering with evidence. Guilty. On the charge of felony firearm use. Guilty. Each guilty landed like a measured hammer strike, repeating twice for each twin since charges ran parallel. The courtroom held its breath through the litany. No one moved until the final count settled. The judge thanked the jury and excused them to the deliberation room for debriefing. As they filed out, several looked toward the defendants, not with anger, but with the quiet certainty of people who had seen the full picture and found it impossible to unsee. Family reaction came in waves. The grandmother sank into her seat, tears silent but steady. Grant's brother placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. The aunt stood, trembling, and whispered something only the woman beside her could hear. No cheers, no shouts. Just the heavy release of truth, finally spoken aloud. The twins showed a flicker of genuine surprise, brief, unguarded. Noah's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Nolan's eyes widened for a heartbeat before the familiar mask slipped back into place, though thinner now, less convincing. They exchanged a quick glance, but the old synchronization felt forced, like actors who had forgotten their cues. The judge spoke next, voice even. Sentencing is set for 2 weeks from today. The court will consider all relevant factors, including the defendant's age at the time of the offense, pursuant to applicable law. He paused, eyes moving from one twin to the other. Youth will be weighed. So will the gravity of these crimes, the premeditation shown, and the complete absence of remorse demonstrated throughout these proceedings. A final gavel tap closed the guilt phase. Media spilled into the hallways immediately. The headlines formed in real time. Smirking twins convicted, guilty on all counts in parental murder case. Public reaction surged online and in print. Anger, disbelief, calls for the maximum penalty. The twins' defense team filed routine post-verdict motions within hours, but the tone had already shifted from hope to damage control. In the jail phone room later that afternoon, one twin, recorded clearly, complained to a relative. "It's unfair." They didn't even listen to the brain expert. No mention of funerals postponed, no reference to the house now standing empty. Only grievance. Victim impact statements began final preparation. Elaine's sister drafted hers in longhand, choosing words that carried the weight of every unsent birthday card. Grandparents selected photos. Grant at a soccer game, Elaine laughing on a porch swing. They debated whether to play the last voicemail again. In the end, they decided yes. But some truths needed to be heard in her own voice. Sentencing law framed the coming hearing tightly. Prosecutors sought life without parole, arguing the rare juvenile standard, permanent incorrigibility demonstrated through planning, cruelty, staging, and persistent lack of accountability. Defense pushed for term of years with parole eligibility, citing brain science and statutory factors that required consideration of age, environment, peer influence, and capacity for change. Psych evaluations entered the record. Low empathy scores, high manipulation indicators, remorse marked absent in every category. One evaluator noted, subjects view consequences as external inconveniences rather than moral failures. A leaked letter from Discovery added another fracture. Noah had written to his attorney blaming Nolan entirely. He pushed the plan. I went along. The document reached Nolan through standard disclosure. No reply surfaced, but the twin bond, once ironclad, now showed visible seams. The narrator paused to reflect. They thought the trial was the end of the story. They believed conviction could still be appealed through charm or technicality. But sentencing is where the judge speaks last, where law meets human judgment, where youth is measured against the permanence of what was taken. The courthouse hallway emptied slowly that evening. Footsteps faded, lights dimmed in unused offices. Justice stood halfway done, the verdict delivered, while the sentence still waiting. And in the quiet that followed, the weight of guilty settled deeper than any smirk could ever lift. The morning of sentencing arrived under a low gray sky that seemed to press down on the courthouse steps. Family members gathered early, carrying framed photographs wrapped in soft cloth. Grant in his work polo at a company picnic. Elaine laughing mid-sentence during a holiday video call. They moved slowly up the marble stairs, coats buttoned against the March chill, on faces set with the kind of quiet determination that comes after too many sleepless nights. Inside the building, security lines felt longer than usual, every beep of the scanner echoing like a countdown. The twins were transported separately this time, shackles clinking in the back of the van as it pulled into the secure garage. They looked slightly older now, hair longer, faces thinner, but the posture remained the same. Chins up, eyes scanning for cameras rather than seeking forgiveness. The deputies guided them through the corridors, past holding cells that smelled faintly of disinfectant and regret. One whispered a joke to the other as they passed a mirror. The deputy's hand tightened on an elbow, silencing it before it could land. The courtroom filled steadily. Relatives took the front rows again, this time with more space between them and the defense tables, as if the verdict had already created an invisible barrier. The prosecutor arrived with a thick sentencing memo, all pages tabbed and highlighted. Defense counsel carried slimmer binders, their arguments built around statutory factors that required the judge to consider youth. The twins were seated, chains adjusted, then left to wait in the hush that precedes final words. The judge entered last, robe settling as he took the bench. Everyone stood. After the ritual of all rise, he began with a calm summary of the case facts. No embellishment, no drama. The planning, the execution, the staging, the disposal, the post-crime behavior, all recited in the flat cadence of someone who had read every page of the file more than once. He turned to the Miller factors, the legal framework that demanded consideration of age, immaturity, family environment, peer influence, and capacity for rehabilitation. He listed them methodically, acknowledging each before moving to the evidence that complicated them. Premeditation was not a fleeting thought, he said. It was documented in searches conducted over months, in draft messages time-stamped the day before, in staging that required forethought, in disposal that showed consciousness of guilt. He paused after each phrase, letting the courtroom absorb the weight. These are repeated choices, not impulsive acts. Remorse came next. The judge referenced the courtroom demeanor, the smirks during victim impact previews, the eye rolls at crime scene photos, the whispered mockery caught on microphones. He cited jail calls where laughter replaced reflection, the insurance inquiry made while responders still worked the scene. This court observed amusement, he stated plainly. Not sorrow, not accountability. Amusement. He addressed the twins directly then, voice lowering but carrying no less force. You thought you would never be caught because you moved as one. You thought age would shield you from consequence. You thought charm could rewrite what evidence had already written. Noah shifted in his seat. Nolan stared at the table, and for the first time, neither met the judge's eyes. The judge acknowledged the victims as people, not case numbers. He noted Grant's overtime sheets, the college fund deposits made even during arguments. He referenced Elaine's last voicemail, preserved, now cued to play. These were parents who loved you, invested in you, believed in your future. That belief was met with planning to end theirs. Victim impact statements began. Elaine's sister spoke first, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. Every morning I wake up hearing her say, "I love you," in that voicemail. Every morning I remember she'll never say it again. She described sorting her sister's closet, finding notes tucked into pockets. Small encouragements meant for the boys who ended her life. The words landed softly but carried far. Grant's co-worker followed, describing overtime shifts Grant took without complaint. He said every hour was for their college, their cars, their start in life. He believed they'd make him proud. The man's voice cracked once, then steadied. They took that belief and used it against him. The grandmother addressed the twins by childhood nicknames, ones they hadn't heard spoken aloud in years. "Where did my grandsons go?" she asked, the question hanging in the silence that followed. No answer came. She sat down slowly, rosary beads clicking in her palm. Then the voicemail played. Elaine's voice filled the room, warm, ordinary, and interrupted mid-sentence. "Call me when you get home. I love you." 30 seconds of normalcy that ended in static. The courtroom went utterly still. One twin, Noah, smirked reflexively, a muscle memory of dismissal, then caught himself and looked away. The judge saw it. The family saw it. Jurors who had returned for closure saw it. The judge noted the reaction for the record, then warned this was their final opportunity to show humanity. The twins' allocution followed. Noah spoke of pressure and a strict house, framing the crime as escape rather than murder. Nolan blamed his brother in veiled terms. I followed the lead, without naming Elaine or Grant as parents. Neither used the words mom or dad. Neither expressed sorrow for what was taken. The judge's face hardened, though his voice remained even. The prosecution closed with measured force. This is the rare case where life without parole is warranted. Planning, cruelty, staging, disposal, our persistent lack of remorse, these demonstrate permanent incorrigibility. Youth was considered. Humanity was measured. The record shows neither sufficient to mitigate. The judge announced a recess to review final documents. He rose, robe sweeping, and disappeared into chambers. The twins exchanged a confident nod, still believing the pause might bring leniency, still clinging to the idea that performance could sway outcome. The door to chambers closed with a soft click, like a final breath held. The courtroom waited. Photos of Grant and Elaine remained facing forward on the gallery rail, their smiles untouched by what came next. The clock above the bench ticked steadily, counting down to the moment when words would become permanent. And in that suspended quiet, the smirk that had carried them this far began to feel like something borrowed, something about to be reclaimed by the truth it had tried so hard to outrun. A court reconvened after the recess with the same heavy stillness that had settled over the room since the verdict. Everyone rose once more as the judge returned, his face carrying the calm of someone who had weighed every argument and found the balance unyielding. The twins stood slowly, chains settling with a faint metallic sigh. Noah's shoulders squared in that practiced way, as if posture alone could still influence outcome. Nolan kept his eyes forward, jaw tight. The confident nod from earlier gone. The judge began without preamble, voice measured and deliberate. He returned to the Miller factors one last time, speaking directly to the legal record. The court has considered the defendant's age at the time of the offense, 16 years old. Adolescence involves incomplete brain development, heightened impulsivity, susceptibility to peer influence, and a diminished capacity to appreciate long-term consequences. He paused, letting the acknowledgement linger. These are mandatory considerations, and the court has given them full weight. Then came the pivot everyone felt approaching. However, the record before this court demonstrates far more than youthful indiscretion. This was not a spontaneous act born of momentary rage or poor impulse control. This was premeditation sustained over months, documented in repeated internet searches for inheritance laws, sentencing guidelines, disposal methods, and insurance payouts. It was planning evidenced by draft messages time-stamped the day before the crime, by rehearsal of statements, by staging a burglary scene with deliberate inconsistencies. He turned the page in his notes. The safe was accessed after multiple failed attempts, requiring knowledge of the combination and persistence under pressure. The vehicle was moved in the dead of night to a remote location for disposal. Evidence was tampered with. Glass pressed into shoe treads, prints wiped selectively, messages deleted, while cloud backups preserved them. These are not the actions of children overwhelmed by circumstance. These are the choices of individuals who understood exactly what they were doing and chose to proceed anyway. Remorse received its own section. Throughout these proceedings, the court has observed demeanor inconsistent with genuine regret. During victim impact testimony, during playback of the 911 call, during presentation of the recovered voicemail, smirks, eye rolls, whispered mockery. In jail communications, laughter replaced reflection. When offered the opportunity to speak today, neither defendant expressed sorrow for the lives taken. Neither referred to the victims as mother and father. Words of pressure and strictness were offered, but no acceptance of responsibility. This court saw amusement where grief should have been. He addressed the twins once more, gaze steady. You thought you would never be caught because you were twins. 2 bodies, 1 intent, 1 story. You believed symmetry would confuse investigators, that age would confuse the law, that performance would confuse the truth. But truth does not require symmetry. It requires only persistence. And the evidence persisted. The judge acknowledged the victims again, this time with quiet emphasis. Grant Mercer worked overtime to build a future for his sons. Elaine Mercer left notes of encouragement, sent texts of love, preserved a voicemail that ended with words every parent hopes to say one last time. That love was met with calculation. That future was ended with a plan. He turned to the defense arguments: brain science, environment, potential for change. Youth can mean capacity for growth. The court has considered that possibility. But capacity is not guarantee. The record shows persistent lack of accountability, manipulation of facts, absence of empathy even in the face of direct confrontation with the human cost of these actions. Rehabilitation requires recognition of harm. Recognition has not been demonstrated. The courtroom remained silent except for the soft scratch of the court reporter's keys and the occasional rustle of paper. The aunt in the front row held Elaine's framed photo against her chest like a shield. The grandmother's rosary beads moved in slow rhythm, counting prayers no one else could hear. The judge continued, voice unchanging. A courtroom is where accountability lives. Smirking does not erase blood. Staging does not undo loss. Entitlement does not justify murder. Youth explains development. It does not excuse premeditated destruction of the people who gave you life. He looked at each twin in turn. You will be sentenced individually, as the law requires. But the court notes that your actions were joint, your intent shared, your benefit mutual. 2 bodies carried 1 plan. Both must answer for it. Family members in the gallery leaned forward slightly, breath held. The prosecutor sat motionless, memo closed. Defense counsel exchanged a final glance, hope thinned to a thread. The judge lifted his gavel, but did not yet strike it. On counts 1 and 2, the pause stretched, heavy and deliberate, like a rope drawn taut across the room. Every eye fixed on the bench. The twins stood frozen, the last trace of practiced composure slipping away. Noah's hand twitched at his side. Nolan swallowed once, visibly. The gavel remained raised. The courtroom waited for the words that would make permanent what the evidence had already proven. And in that suspended moment, the illusion of untouchability finally dissolved. No more scripts, no more symmetry, only consequence, arriving exactly as the judge had prepared to speak it. The judge let the pause hold just long enough for silence to become its own statement. Then he spoke the words everyone had waited for, voice clear and final. On counts 1 and 2, first-degree murder in the death of Grant Mercer and first-degree murder in the death of Elaine Mercer, the sentence is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He repeated the phrase for Nolan, the same measured tone carrying the same irreversible weight. Life without the possibility of parole. The courtroom exhaled in fragments. A soft sob broke from the gallery. The aunt pressed Elaine's framed photo harder against her chest. The grandmother closed her eyes, rosary beads stilling in her lap. No cheers rose, no outburst shattered the hush. Only the quiet release of something long, held tight, finally allowed to loosen. Noah's smirk collapsed first. The practiced curve of his mouth faltered, then vanished entirely, replaced by blank confusion, like someone who had misheard a familiar language. His eyes darted to his brother, searching for the old sync that no longer answered. Nolan's face froze mid-expression, the forced composure cracking into something raw. The sudden, childish realization that forever was literal this time. No appeal charm could rewrite, no performance left to run. The judge continued without pause. This sentence is not vengeance. It is protection of the community and recognition of the truth the evidence has established. The premeditation, the staging, the disposal of evidence, the persistent lack of remorse, all demonstrate that these defendants present a continuing danger that parole cannot reasonably mitigate. He set the gavel down with deliberate care, the sound final, but not loud. Defendants are remanded to the custody of the Department of Corrections to begin serving their sentences immediately. Any further proceedings in this matter are concluded. Deputies moved forward, hands guided elbows with professional firmness. The twins rose on unsteady legs, chains clinking in a rhythm that now sounded smaller, more ordinary. As they were turned toward the side door, Noah whispered once, "No. No?" The word barely audible, swallowed by the shuffle of feet. Nolan stared straight ahead, eyes glassy, the last trace of defiance gone. The courtroom doors opened. Cameras flashed in the corridor like cold lightning. The twins looked instinctively toward the lenses, habit from months of believing attention was currency, then found no comfort there. No one clapped. No one shouted questions they wanted to answer. The hallway emptied behind them, deputies closing ranks, sealing the moment in routine procedure. Outside on the steps, the family gathered in loose formation. Elaine's sister spoke first to the waiting microphones, voice steady despite red-rimmed eyes. "They're still my blood, but they ended my sister. That doesn't change because of a sentence." She paused, then added quietly, "Justice was served today. Not perfectly, but it was served." The grandparents returned to the empty house that evening. Elaine's voicemail played softly from a kitchen speaker they had saved to a small device, her voice filling rooms that would never hear it live again. Grant's work boots remained by the back door, mud still caked in the treads. The calendar on the wall had been taken down months earlier, but its final entry, twin driver's test, 4 p.m., lingered in memory like an unanswered appointment. Detective Vega closed the case file in her office later that week. She placed it in a box marked "Closed Mercer," lid shutting with a soft thud. Satisfaction arrived not as joy, but as quiet certainty. A door locked that needed locking. She allowed herself one long breath before turning off the desk lamp. At the high school, counselors met with students who had known the twins. Yearbooks were open to old team photos, faces now reframed by hindsight. "Oh, we didn't see it," one friend said in a quiet circle. "We should have." The words hung honest and heavy, part of the slow work of making sense of something senseless. The twins thought they would never be caught because they were two minds, two bodies, two voices, saying the same lie. But the evidence was many. Doorbell timestamps, smart lock logs, cloud backups, river stones, gunshot residue, recovered texts, trajectory angles, gate matches, jail calls, courtroom demeanor. Truth did not need symmetry. It only needed to be relentless, and it had been. Was justice truly served here? Some would argue no sentence undoes loss. Others would say life without parole protects what remains. Forgiveness, perhaps, might mean something if remorse had ever appeared. But remorse never came. The question lingers for anyone who follows stories like this. When someone refuses to carry the weight of what they have done, must the world carry it for them forever? The gavel had fallen. The smirk disappeared, not in a dramatic shatter, but in the slow, quiet erosion of illusion meeting consequence. The courtroom reporter typed the final entry that day. Case closed, file archived, sentences begun. In the silence that followed, the house on the quiet cul-de-sac stood empty, porch light clicking on at dusk as always. Somewhere inside, a calendar square remained blank, the ink of interrupted plans long faded. And two boys who once believed they were untouchable began the rest of their lives learning exactly how wrong they had been.